You've probably heard the story about Jesus getting angry and flipping tables in the temple, right? Have you ever wondered why he did that? Or questioned if it was even right that Jesus got angry? Or maybe you've questioned if that attitude is one that we're supposed to follow. Right now at my church, we're going through this series, walking through the book of John. And this past week, we looked at the story, and although I know that it wasn't wrong for Jesus to get angry, I started to ask myself the question, why did he get so angry? And I thought I would just share what it is that I learned with you. Hey everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to Featuring Fatherhood, where we talk all things faith, family, and fatherhood related. I'm glad to have you joining us today. You know, this story of Jesus getting angry can be a confusing one for many. It seems a little off, like we think of Jesus as this meek and gentle man, right? And his attitude of anger, it just seems a little off character. So how do we make sense of this in our own understanding? Well, the first thing is to recognize that this wasn't wrong. It wasn't wrong for Jesus to get angry. Once we accept this fact, and I'll explain later on why that is, but once we accept this, we can start to look at the question, why did Jesus become so angry? So Jesus and his disciples were traveling to Jerusalem for the Passover, which was a feast that celebrated the time that God brought the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. During this festival, many Israelites flocked to Jerusalem to celebrate and to make offerings at the temple. Now, this making offerings was an essential part of the festival and of Jewish faith. The idea was that you find a spotless animal and you kill it as an offering for your sin. The sin of yourself would go onto the animal, it would transfer to the blameless animal. Might seem a little harsh to the animal, but this is how people were reconciled to God. And of course, later in the Gospels, we see Jesus become our blameless lamb who is sacrificed for us, and in so doing, he ends the practice of needing animals to sacrifice for our sins. Anyway though, in order for the people to gain forgiveness for their sins, they had to bring an animal to the temple to be sacrificed. And when Jesus arrives to the temple, he found that its outer court was filled with merchants selling animals to be sacrificed and money changers exchanging money with foreign currency. We hear this and maybe wonder, what's so wrong about this? I mean, people have to have the right kind of money to be able to buy and sell things, right? And not everyone has access to animals to bring as a sacrifice. So it kind of makes sense that they have animals at the temple to purchase and, for sacrifice, right? And on top of that, if you were to bring your own animal, a priest would first have to sign off that that animal was pure and spotless, clean enough to be sacrificed. And if they said no, well, then you just have to go and buy one of the pre-verified animals inside the temple. So why not just buy one of the pre-verified ones to start with? Well, sure, in our thinking, that makes sense. But the problem was the motives behind the sale of these animals and the exchanging of money was not a pure one. The price of the animals were exponentially higher than they should have been. And it was like going to a sporting event, where we buy an $8 hot dog. We all recognize that it's ridiculous and it's a ripoff, but we can't bring our own food in and we're hungry, so what else are we gonna do? Give us the hot dog. When it comes to the money changers, people who lived outside Jerusalem didn't have the proper money to buy the sacrifices, so they would have to exchange their money for the correct currency. And if you've ever been to a foreign country, you know that you have to exchange your home nation's currency for the currency of the nation you're entering. And most of the time, there's a small fee for exchanging that money. We all accept that. Again, we kind of have to. But in this situation, the money exchangers were charging an exorbitant fee to exchange money. So the first thing to note here is that Jesus gets angry because his people, were being taken advantage of. Jesus said, "You have turned my Father's house into a den of thieves." Jesus cared about justice. He wants people to be free to come to him. But what was happening in the temple was making it harder for people to come to God. The second thing we have to recognize was where this was taking place. The temple was made up of 4 courts, and in the center was the Holy of Holies, the place where God's presence dwelled. Each court was closer to the Holy of Holies. The innermost court was the court of the priests, where only Jewish priests could be. The next court was the court of the Israelites, where any Jewish man could be. And then the next one out was the court of the women, where all Jewish women could be. And the outermost court was the court of the Gentiles, where anyone who was not Jewish could be. This incident was happening in the court of the Gentiles. Why was it happening here? Why not outside of the temple? Well, again, you go back to the clean animals things. All the animals in this court were already pre-verified to be clean by the priests. Having the animals inside the temple probably made it a lot easier to distinguish the pre-verified ones from the non-pre-verified ones. Same with money exchangers. Best to have them where the people need them. It's like how casinos kind of have, ATMs everywhere. But on top of that, it was the court of the Gentiles. I mean, who really cared if the Gentiles got a little gypped in their worship? Well, Jesus cared. He really cared. Jesus didn't come just to save the Jewish people. And thank goodness for that, because most of us, myself included, that would have meant that we would have been left out. No, Jesus came to save the whole world, Jews and Gentiles alike. And we see that in the Gospels, Jesus cared about the Gentiles. We read stories like the Samaritan woman at the well and the healing of the Roman centurion's daughter. Not only did Jesus want Jewish people to be able to have a relationship with God, but he wanted Gentiles to be able to as well. And so this makeshift market in the court of the Gentiles, the only place where Gentiles were allowed to worship, was a hindrance to them. Imagine you walk into a church for the first time, and the first thing you see is people trying to sell you stuff that they say you need, and trying to tell you that you haven't brought what's required to worship God. And then in order for you to have the right stuff to worship God, you have to pay an exorbitant amount. I mean, if that's me, I'd turn around, walk out, and probably not walk back in. The Israelites were supposed to be an example to the world around them. Jesus' plan was to bring the whole world to faith through the Jewish people. But here they were, making it very, very hard for non-Jews to come and meet God. So those two things, the people being taken advantage of, and the religious leaders making it hard for people to worship God in his own house, a house meant for worship, definitely set Jesus off. Yes, Jesus is meek and gentle, but we also have to realize that Jesus is zealous for justice and for what we were all created for, to worship God. Many people find it hard to see that the God we read of in the Old Testament is the same God that we read of in the New Testament. The God of the Old Testament was angry and violent. I mean, he wiped out the entire world with a flood. He struck down an Israelite man who touched the Ark of the Covenant because it was about to fall off the cart that it was on. He helped his people wipe out neighboring nations. This was an angry God. I mean, yes and no. God did resort to violence at times, but he was justified in that. But that's another video. The thing to remember here is that Jesus is the same God that we see in the Old Testament. They are one and the same. So yes, while Jesus is meek and gentle, he can also be angry at the things that keep us away from his Father. So how does this apply to us? What can we learn from it? I think the main takeaway I have from this passage is this: do everything in our power to make it easy for people to come to God, and don't put anything in their way that could hinder them. You might ask, well, how do we do this? The answer is simple. Look at how Jesus did it. He went to the people he knew needed him. He healed, he taught, he cared, and he loved them. He welcomed them. Start there. Welcome your neighbors. Love on them. If they have a need that you can meet, do it. If there's a way that you can care for them, do it. If there's something that Jesus has taught you, share it. Our goal is to reflect Jesus in everything we do. So become the person that when people look at you, they can't help but see Jesus. And I know that's not easy. Take it from me, I fail at that all the time. But it is possible. Jesus set an example for us to be able to follow. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This has been really fun for me to be able to get back into the teaching sort of arena. So look out for more videos like this. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up or a comment. It really makes a difference in helping other people see this video. And if you want to follow along and see more videos, hit the subscribe button. We truly appreciate it. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.